Hello, I'm the Nostalgia Critic. I remember it so you don't have to. And welcome to another rendition of Old vs. New. Who would have thought a story about a giant monkey who falls in love with a woman, climbs buildings, and smashes dinosaurs would be considered a classic? Well, King Kong certainly was. When it was released in 1933, it captured the world's interest with its groundbreaking effects and a timeless story about what happens when two threatening natures collide. Since then, there's been several remakes, but they sucked donkeys, and none of them have been considered on par with the original. That is until 2005, when Peter Jackson took his shot at telling the story. This is the only version that people say is not only as good as the original, but possibly better. But can it truly outdo the classic? Is there really enough there to keep it fresh and new while still staying true to the original? Well, let's find out. I never thought I'd be put in a position to say this, but it's monkey versus monkey here on Nostalgia Critic. This is Old vs. New King Kong. Well, we can't tell this Beauty and the Beast story without our beauty. That is not the beauty, for most of us. I'm talking about our main actress, who happens to play the main actress. This is our best leading lady. Now, both of these films have good, charismatic actresses. Each has to have a charming personality and good looks to match in order to tame the beast. They are certainly different, though. In the original, the character Odero is played by Fay Wray, who is constantly told that she doesn't belong on board.
I wish you wouldn't keep harping on that. It's very mean of you.
Women just can't help being a bother. Made that way, I guess.
Despite that, though, she still keeps an optimistic point of view.
Don't you think the skipper's a sweet old lamb?
I'd hate to have him hear me say that.
In the newer version, she's played by Naomi Watts, who's a little more welcomed on the ship, so she doesn't have to defend herself as much.
What a lovely dress.
Oh, this old thing? I just threw it on.
Both have to play the classic screaming damsel in distress, and in terms of traditional screamers, Fay Wray is probably a little closer. But Watts' portrayal has a little bit more edge to it. In the original, King Kong just sort of likes Darrow. And even though they make her very positive and energetic, all she does around Kong is scream. Granted, we don't want to see anything bad happen to her, but she doesn't do anything that would make Kong really like her. The newer one has to work for her survival. They indicate that Kong has killed dozens of sacrifices in the past, but because of her performance training, she's able to actually entertain Kong. But even she has her limits.
I said no! That's all there is.
She's standing up to a 10-story gorilla. That takes balls. Or ovaries, I don't know, but it takes a lot of them. Because of this, the newer version truly does have the better lead. She's just more interesting and takes more chances. The original is good too. You really do like her and don't want to see her in danger, but the screaming just gets a little old after a while. Yeah, scream some more. Maybe he'll finally go away. Point goes to the new.
Oh dear, and I thought everything was going so nicely.
But what about the supporting cast? Do they match up just as well as the lead? Well, here's the little people that literally got stepped on to make it to the top. Let's start with the romantic lead. In the original, he's played by Bruce Cabot, a rough and gruff sailor who doesn't like the idea of women being on board his ship. Now, why would that be? No, that's not it. In fact, he actually ends up falling in love with Darrow, even if it is pretty sporadic.
See, if anything had happened to you...
Well, then you wouldn't be bothered with having a woman on board.
Say, I guess I love you.
I've only known you for 5 minutes, but unless a giant gorilla comes through the trees and steals you away, I think you're the one. And granted, some of the dialogue is a little hokey too. In fact, they even make fun of it in the remake. The lines they shoot for their movie are actually identical to the ones they say in the original. Except in the original, that was supposed to be the real dialogue.
I think this is awfully exciting. I've never been on a ship before.
Well, I've never been on one with a woman before.
I think this is awfully exciting. I've never been on a ship before.
I've never been on one with a woman before.
But for all the stereotypical macho-ness, he actually is pretty likable. Sort of the tough guy with a soft heart sort of thing.
Well, I was a little scared.
I guess you weren't the only one.
In the new one, we get Adrian Brody, who is straight up boring.
That was pure effluence.
I beefed up the banter.
Try to resist that impulse,
I'm sorry, but he is just not interesting. I know they're trying to downplay the hero aspect and make him look like a normal, boring guy, but you can still make him look like an interesting, boring guy. If that makes any sense.
Why would I write a play for you? Isn't it obvious? It's in the subtext.
By God, you're a doll. What about the crazy director that takes him on this voyage? Again, I prefer the original, played by Robert Armstrong. Mostly because if you looked at him, you wouldn't guess that he was an eccentric thrill seeker. He's very professional and sort of keeps to himself, which shrouds his character in a lot more mystery.
But you've got a reputation for recklessness that can't be glossed over. And then you're so secretive. Good Lord, you talk as if I never brought anybody back alive.
When you see him, you think sort of a mad genius. A guy who can convince you to jump off a cliff if it would make the shot look good.
What do I have to do?
Just trust me and keep your chin up.
He's very smooth, even if he is batshit insane. Jack Black, on the other hand, is a little too obvious. He always has his eyes bugging out and always seems to talk in an intense manner.
No, Carl, you can't do that. Tell them the studio pressured us into an early departure. It's not ethical. What are they gonna do, sue me? Huh?
Now granted, a lot of directors do act like that.
カットカットカットカットカットサントリーの響きだよ。高いんだからサントリーの中で一番。もう、インテンシティ。サントリータイム。
But for a voyage this crazy, you have to have the ability to convince people and make them trust you. I don't get that from Black. I don't believe anyone would go with him on a crazy voyage. I don't know, maybe I just can't trust anyone who isn't Biodome. That would taint anybody's liability for me. The rest of the crew in the new version, though, are pretty memorable. I like Andy Serkis's cutthroat cook.
On a castaway, he spoke of a creature, neither beast nor man.
Yeah, I can hardly wait.
And I thought that Hayes guy was pretty mysterious too. The rest of the crew in the original is pretty forgettable. You know, outside of the obvious racial stereotypes.
Me not see 1 2 hours. Look, sir, me find on deck. Native bracelet. Crazy black man been here.
Speaking of which, that tribe is pretty silly looking nowadays, isn't it? I'm sure it was impressive back then, but now it just looks silly. You'd come across more realistic natives in Gilligan's Island. The ones in the newer version are just fucking crazy, and a lot more intimidating.
Look, chocolate. You like chocolate?
Note to self, chocolate means war. Sort of a toss-up, but I am going to go with the original. Mostly because of the romantic lead and the film director. They're just bigger roles, so they soak up a lot more credit. And in this comparison, that adds up to a lot. Point goes to the old.
What are you, an idiot?